Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying the speakers lineup. So thank you. I want to remind you to also please provide your feedback for each session and the event in general. This information helps us improve the experience for every summit that we put together. I can tell you that it has proven very useful as we continue to mature our program. We now have some words from Colin Miller, who is the Director of Cloud Security with our gold sponsor, Structured. I looked at the presentation, it looks very interesting, and I'm looking forward. So I even went ahead and gave them a little extra minutes. I think I'm back with 5 minutes extra that I have. So we're gonna talk a little bit about securing the Microsoft 365 deployments. So, Colin.
Thanks, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Colin Miller, and we're going to talk a little bit about the M365 Copilot. The topic of this conference was Secure by Design, and my specialty right now has been really focused on AI security, and so I thought Copilot is a great case study in kind of trying to build an AI agent that is secure by design. So first I want to talk just generally about securing AI. What does secure by design really mean in the context of generative AI and artificial intelligence? Next we'll talk about Copilot and why we believe it is a good enterprise AI for most use cases, how it is designed for security from the ground up. Then we'll talk about Copilot security best practices. While it is secure by design, it's not perfect out of the box. It's not necessarily secure by default, as it was mentioned in the first slide. And we'll talk really briefly about the service offering Structured has around Copilot and AI security. At the beginning of each section, I have a little movie quote from an AI. This one is from HAL 9000 from Space Odyssey. Sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. So this is a little something that I've I came up with, but it's not necessarily unique. It's not necessarily a novel thought. But this AI, you may be familiar with the security triad in InfoSec, right? This confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is a little triad, the AI security triad. And the idea here is really that we have these three unique entities, AI models, users, and data, and we essentially need to protect each one from each other. There are risks associated with each one in a bidirectional fashion. So we need to protect not only AI models from users, right? That's kind of a more traditional, we have to protect an IT system from potential malicious users. But there's the potential for the AI to act in malicious ways towards users and cause risk or harm to users as well. So large language models, in short, bring up unique and interesting security challenges. You obviously have all of the traditional IT security challenges. You still have to do API security. You still have to secure your data and have good data governance. But there are specific attacks and risk vectors against AI that are unique to large language models. An example of that would be something like model poisoning or misuse, right? Putting bad data into the model will give you bad outputs. These are not just conceptual. There's plenty of real-world examples of exploiting these techniques. For brevity, I have up here kind of the OWASP top 10 for large language models. There's also, if you're familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK framework in cybersecurity, there is a special MITRE Atlas framework for large language models. I recommend looking that up as well. But this is kind of just the quick top 10 from OWASP. If you're familiar with them, they're a web security organization. And these are specific to large language models. Things like excessive agency, right? If you have an agent LLM that is able to go out and do things, are you scoping its permissions effectively? Or is it able to just kind of run away and access all of your data? Understanding these challenges really help us explain why Copilot's protections matter. Prompt injection is another one that gets a lot of, a lot of people are talking about it. It's an interesting new attack vector, this idea that you may have had something like a SQL injection in a traditional system where you sent it a line of SQL and got data back that you shouldn't. In this context, right, you need a little bit more of a silver tongue. You're convincing the model to do something that otherwise it shouldn't do. So don't have a whole lot of time here. Talk a little bit about Microsoft 365 Copilot specifically. And its enterprise architecture. Another little quote here from the Matrix. So this is the architecture diagram from Microsoft for Copilot for M365. You can tell it's secure because they put a dotted line around the entire thing. So, solid security boundary there. You can also tell it's secure because of all the little locks on the lines. But in reality, there is a lot going on in this diagram that's important to note from an LLM security and a secure by design perspective. There's a little acronym if you can see in this eye chart underneath the large language model, RAI. That stands for responsible AI. It's a series of Microsoft principles and controls that they use to make sure you're not getting bad outputs from the model. So the model shouldn't do things like teach you how to make TNT. The model, should have outputs that are business friendly and would fall under most people's acceptable use policies. And that kind of helps prevent against that risk I talked about, which is the model harming the user. In addition, Microsoft is able to do all of their Copilot or all of their Purview DLP on Copilot responses. So that should prevent any kind of sensitive data from going into or out of the model. And in the other eye chart up north of the large language model, it talks about how Microsoft does not use any of the prompts or data that's put into the model to train their foundational models. So all of those things kind of help bound this in a way that is secure by design. In addition, this model, Copilot has access, and one of the things that makes it powerful and different maybe from just using straight ChatGPT or one of the other LLMs available, it has access to all of your context and content. So it knows about your calendar, your emails, your OneDrive data, and that makes it really powerful in terms of being able to help you as a digital assistant. But it also means that we need to be really careful about what data it can access. The good news is that all of your existing permissions and controls you have in your M365 tenant apply to Copilot. So if you block people from accessing a folder and only HR or only finance can access that folder, only HR or finance should get results from Copilot. This is very different from the security model of a ChatGPT enterprise, where data tends to follow the agent or model that is being built. You load in its memory or its data into a given model. Anybody who has access to that then has access to that data. So in this case, the permissions follow the user, not the model. Some other kind of key elements, architectural isolation and least privilege. So we talked a little bit about that idea of it's bounded within Microsoft. Microsoft is not calling an API to OpenAI, right? They're running their own instance of API, own instance of ChatGPT in Azure within that bounded security boundary. They're not letting any of that data train other models. There was a little note on that last architecture slide that talked about plugins and calling external models and external data sources. That is a risk, and you need to again, that comes down to carefully scoping it. There's prompt protection and input sanitation, so that comes down to the responsible AI permissions or responsible AI tools that I talked about. So there's no need for you to deploy an AI firewall in front of a Copilot model like you might have to if you were going to stand up your own ChatGPT or use Claude or something like that. Requests are also processed statelessly. So this was a big deal at first. When Microsoft first rolled out Copilot for M365, there was no chat history. That's how seriously they took this stateless idea, right? Is that you would enter in a prompt, if you got something back and you liked it, you had to copy and paste that thing out of it or it was gone forever. There's still the concept of they're stateless within a given chat, right? So if you start chatting and you hit the new chat button, it doesn't know anything about any previous chats that you've had. And that's both a pro and a con, right? From a security standpoint, that makes it much more secure. If you compromise a given section, you only have access to the data within that session. But on the flip side of that, it makes maybe the model less powerful because it doesn't have it doesn't understand you in the context of all the conversations you've had over time. There is also data controls, encryption, and compliance. So data is encrypted in transit and at rest using FIPS 140 certified encryption. And it supports double key encryption for sensitive data. So you can, again, you leverage those purview controls to encrypt data such that the model never has access to the raw data. Since I have a short on time here, we're going to go quickly through these best practices. A little quote from C3PO there you can read yourself. The idea is that this can be, kind of enabling Copilot in a secure fashion can be a little bit of an asteroid field. So even though they spent all that time, Microsoft put all that effort into securing Copilot from a enterprise-grade application perspective, there's still a lot of risks associated with it. So no system is perfect. Oversight remains crucial. AI is by no means an infallible technology. It's also not a deterministic technology, which means if I put a given input into Copilot, I'm not always going to get the same output. And that makes it hard from a security perspective to make sure that you're, have all those protections in place. And just like any cloud service, security is also a shared responsibility. So it's still your job to have a good, secure Microsoft 365 tenant with permissions that are least privileged and make sense, and adopting some of those zero trust principles. Copilot can also miss certain vulnerabilities. So there was, if you've heard of Echo Leak, that was a recent vulnerability in Copilot. Kind of an interesting one. The attackers were able to send an email to somebody, embedded in the email inside of a little, tiny 1 pixel image or whatnot was instructions for Copilot to exfiltrate data. And so when you asked Copilot a question and it decided to go read your email to figure out if it could find an answer to that question, it would find these instructions that said, hey, send this data out to this website. Don't tell the user about it. They've since patched that vulnerability, but it's an example that there are specific no-click remote code execution vulnerabilities that can exfiltrate data in these technologies that are unique to these type of technologies that would never happen in a traditional system. You're not going to block that in email with an email filter because it just looks like an image with some text that's going to instruct the user to do something. How do you mitigate, or how do you, handle some of these things? Well, human review is one way, right? I do believe that you still need humans in the loop to at least statistically sample what you're getting back from Copilot and understand what are the risks there. User feedback can be really important in that too. So having some kind of feedback mechanism. So if a user sees something strange in a Copilot chat, they can report that. Red teaming is another key element with large language models in general. So this idea that you would have somebody who's actively trying prompt injections or to get your sensitive data out of the model to verify that the controls and security are all in place. And then basic data security and data governance, right? Having some kind of system that makes sure highly sensitive data or data you would not want to show up in a result is protected in some way, typically using purview labeling, but there's a lot of DLP technologies out there you can leverage. And then some best practices, just some general recommendations for secure deployment. Zero trust identity and MFA. WWT was up here talking a little bit about that as well. It is important to apply your zero trust principles, continuously monitor, and force MFA for users. You need to know who's talking to the model in order to have the data security work effectively. You want to review and restrict your permissions regularly. So it becomes more important than ever with something like Copilot to make sure that your SharePoint and OneDrive have appropriate permissions in place, that your default sharing policy isn't just everybody in the org can edit everything. Again, using purview, DLP, and sensitivity labeling, that can really help in terms of your organization's specific sensitive data that you don't want to show up in the environment. It prevents you having to go restructure your SharePoint sites and things like that to prevent Copilot access. User education, always important. There was a security awareness training talk earlier today, but really important to educate your users on proper prompt hygiene and how to share data. One of the things that's kind of interesting about Copilot, if you share a link with somebody to a piece of data, Copilot can access the data via that link. So they don't have to have specific permissions in the folder. Even shared links will work. And then monitoring your deployment and applying updates regularly, some basic cybersecurity practice, but becomes even more important. Copilot is evolving very fast. Microsoft has a lot of development effort in this area. And obviously the backend models from ChatGPT are also updating relatively fast. So applying regular updates, being on the current or monthly update channel, very important. And lastly, I'll just end real quick with our offerings, how we can help you. Another quote, this time from Dr. No from AI, the movie Artificial Intelligence by Steven Spielberg. One of my favorite representations of AI in cinema. I think it's the closest to what we have today, and a great performance by Robin Williams. So yeah, in terms of service offering, we offer a comprehensive security assessment for M365 around Copilot. We'll evaluate your current IT infrastructure, your M365 security posture, data governance against any kind of compliance frameworks. The idea is to ensure a secure rollout of Copilot. How do we do it? We identify and interview key stakeholders in the organization, not only to identify use cases for Copilot, which I think is really important to have clearly identified use cases, but also to address any user concerns around AI adoption. A lot of users have concerns around using AI. They have concerns around data security, but they also have concerns around will it take my job? Can it do this effectively? What about hallucinations and bad data? We also evaluate the current M365 security configuration. So even if you decide not to adopt Copilot, good idea to review your M365 estate and security posture. We go through each individual console, Teams, SharePoint, looking for best practices and gaps around Copilot. We'll also review relevant third-party security controls. So we have a deep bench of engineers that work with a whole variety of vendors, some of which are represented here at this conference as sponsors. We leverage Microsoft security standards wherever appropriate and necessary. So Microsoft has a whole set of zero trust principles for Copilot, for instance, that we leverage. And then we'll also review policy, things like your acceptable use policy, data governance, et cetera. Lastly, kind of why choose us? Structured has 30 years of experience as a company helping organizations adopt new technology securely. I've been with Structured for over 20 years myself. We've been in the Northwest kind of helping people out and building a reputation, whether it was adopting mobile security, which brought up a lot of the same shadow IT concerns that we're seeing with AI and Copilot, or whether it was cloud or virtualization, which opened up new attack vectors like the hypervisor. We've always helped our customers adopt these new technologies in a secure fashion. We have the relevant Microsoft certifications. Some of those are listed up there, and we're a Microsoft CSP partner as well. So yeah, thank you for your time. I think I'm out of time here, but if you have any questions, you can come see me at the Structured booth afterwards. Happy to answer them.